The ego is the system that runs your sense of self. It is made out of thought patterns, emotions, and behavior loops, and the stories that try to hold it all together. Left unchecked, it creates endless existential searching, chronic disconnection, and the persistent sense that something is wrong. The goal of my videos is clarity, to see your identity and its contradictions for what they are, named precisely, to finally understand what it is that we're all running away from. It is trippy to think about the nature of the self, because thinking about the nature of the self reveals that I think and therefore I am is wrong. It is not thinking that makes you who you are. It is the act of witnessing. Witnessing means observing. Observation means verifying something exists. You are constantly verifying things existing. And you do this in many intricate and detailed ways. When you wake up every single day, imagine you could calculate the amount of qualia, the amount of sensation you experience every second. If you meditate on what is actually going on in your awareness, you will see that there is so much going on in any point in time, and focus and attention zooms in on a particular node or cluster of qualia. If you now are paying attention to this video while I'm talking to you, your entire field kind of hones in onto witnessing what I'm saying. And you forget that you are also experiencing gravity, that you are breathing, that every few seconds or less, you are actually blinking and becoming blind for a moment. There is an ununderstandable amount of experience that goes on every single microsecond. And if you go deeper into how it is like to actually live moment to moment, then qualia starts to appear as the real witnessing substance of all things, and you start to see yourself identical to all qualia. Something that is very insightful, or something that was very insightful for me, was that no sensation can experience another sensation. So in your conscious field right now, it is not possible for hearing to also experience the touch that you might have on your hand right now. Or your sense of having hair doesn't actually compete with the fact that you're also sensing gravity. They're all happening in one apparently continuous field at the same time, while also giving the illusion that they are somewhat separated because of where you're putting your attention on. When you're putting your attention on thinking all the time, you are very disconnected from this entire process. You believe that you are not actually the witnesser, but the thinker or the doer. And then you have this disconnect between the experiences that your body puts you under and your sense of control in your own head. But they are never actually separate, as even the sense of control, even the sense of thinking has the exact same nature of all other qualia, which is that you cannot actually have one qualia experience another piece of qualia. There's no center of I that actually moves outward and then experiences the sensations and puts them inward. Every little sensation exists completely on their own, holistically, and knows exactly what it is in every single point in time. This is why witnessing is recognition. You recognize how it's like to feel wet when you are in the shower. You notice how it's like to feel gravity when you're walking. These sensations are known in its immediacy. And what philosophy and this existential searching does is it questions the obvious. It is not good enough for you to just see how everything is like in the moment, but you need to question what is like behind it. You look underneath the veil. And if you are looking underneath the veil in terms of your own ego, then you uncover deeper truth that you are hiding from yourself. But if you're trying to look underneath the veil of some true absolute nature of reality, most likely is that you will construct meaning narratives and become somewhat ungrounded because you're going to be attached to belief system. As belief systems become sort of like the fulfillment, or like what fills the empty canvas of this like raw experience, because the raw experience is like devoid of meaning. But if you now can say, okay, but this is a deterministic reality and everything just happens on its own, then the philosophy of determinism has just the function of tethering you to some sort of understanding. But it is also part of this construct that, yeah, tries to make sense of the world. Because if you're a cat, believe me, you do not have any thoughts about determinism. and I'm very certain of this without being a cat, which maybe that's my hubris. But you cannot take an overlay on top of your own conscious experience and then believe that this meaning making overlay is what is actually happening. That's what confuses people so much when they investigate the phenomenology of their own experience, because they confuse the content with the texture. I am going to publish an article today where I talk about the difference between the phenomenology of something very extraordinary, like experiencing existence to be holy, like how is the texture of that experience, and how humans always put in more content on top of it that basically derails the truth of the matter. And you can find this article in my Substack. There's a certain hidden mechanism when you diminish the gap between the sense of center that witnesses and the raw quality of everything. Because then you start to identify with the raw quality of everything, the sense of experience here dissolves, and now suddenly there's this kind of scary realization that, wait, if what I truly am is just this flux of sensations that interact with their outside environment, then doesn't this imply I am somewhat localized everywhere? Because in my own experience, I can notice how I am kind of like diffused in this time and space reality in so many different ways. I cannot hold on to anything. I didn't choose to be here. So this kind of implies that all modes of reality that also have a conscious experience, that are witnessing, are fundamentally the same as me. Like that there's no way I can actually make an ultimate distinction between what is the essence of my humanity and what is the essence of another person's humanity, or what is the essence of another being's consciousness, like an animal. You cannot find the distinction if you identify outside of just the raw biology. This is why a lot of people get kind of moved out of their body, because if you're constantly focusing on the qualia, the body doesn't start to feel necessarily more solid and physical than just the smell of something pleasant. It all starts to kind of become the same sense data machinery that just gives you more data to witness. If you don't like that this is how reality is like, and you wish to somehow escape this necessity to witness stuff, then life gets miserable, because you cannot remove yourself from what you are. That's precisely what all the seeking does. It's people wanting to transcend their bodies. It's wanting to transcend the witnessing. And it becomes a bit difficult, because there's even a sense in which you do transcend the witnesser by dissolving the gap. But the process of getting there is just very uncomfortable and scary, and might feel like, I actually didn't want to remove the witnesser. I wanted to remove the ability to experience anything at all, which is where this ideation thing comes in, right? Like, I don't actually want to experience stuff. But now, if I am truly qualia and I am all of the sensations, then I am actually the ultimate witness of reality. And this is my nature to such a foundational extent that some true infinite ceasing doesn't make sense. And there are a lot of existential fears that waken up from this realization, because whoa, like I'm kind of everybody. This means that I have to go through all conscious experience in all of time and space. There's a good reason the ego wants to shut that down, because it is just so overwhelming to look at reality for what it is. Because reality is just this huge thing, it is very big, infinite, you might say. There's this desire for the witnessing ego to be more than what it is. And it does not like that it is just this, very limited perspective that just aggregates all of these conscious experiences, but then, basically has to sort them and control them in order, for it to survive. What it really wants to be, it wants to be some sort of grandiose thing that actually transcends experience, that is above pain and above its own biological nature and above the need to, respect gravity. It has like the sense of grandiosity that oftentimes gets mixed in with spirituality. So if you have like a certain spiritual realization, like everything is one, or I am qualia, or I'm awareness, for most people who have this sort of insight, have still an ego. I mean, that's, you can count count this true for really everybody, because the insights or the awakening is just actually the first step of realizing the ego exists. But from the perspective of the ego, it's sometimes, well, I am enlightened now. I know everything because, I see now how I am, and this is just the truth, and that's it. And when it actually does not understand how conditioned it is, how socially manipulated it is, and how kind of stuck it is in, its own patterns. And only through time and a lot of humility, it starts to understand that, it is really identical to the awareness, and that in a real way, it doesn't actually exist. And what it does is to believe that it has to exist or must exist somehow. If you want to understand your own identity structure, I have an ego architecture audit where, I can analyze your sense of identity. Important to notice that I will phase out the current version of my ego architecture audit, and then also make a price increase. So if you have considered participating, then now would be a good time, because the mechanics of it will change soon. There's this kind of need for the ego to be seen, which is the ultimate way of witnessing, which is in a way also what I'm facilitating, because it wants to know it is real. The ego wants to feel like it actually exists. It doesn't want it to be just one weird diffused state of qualia, but it wants to know how it is like, who it is like, why it is like this. And this is a bit this sense of self-finding, like wanting to have an identity that makes sense, that you can find. And if you are deep enough in the rabbit hole, you likely have to deconstruct it further, like actually dissolve it to like a larger extent before you can find it again. Because as long as it is clinging to be something, it can never find itself, because it is clinging to stuff that it cannot be, because you're not solid. You're not an identity that stays the same. So when you are seen for who you are, what you're actually becoming, and that's why we like to have intimate relationships with people, why we have friends, why we have lovers, why everybody is so sex obsessed, because it gives you the sense of acceptance with another person's architecture of witnessing. Being witnessed by others makes you feel real, makes you feel whole, makes you feel like you can connect with another, because if another person can see how you are and who you are, then it is like you actually exist. And the idea that you might, for example, lose the ability to have these connections with people, the possibility that you might lose to have this deep relationship with others, is also part of why this is so scary. Because if you're noticing that you're really just the witnesser, then there's not really a personality there with whom you can connect with. You're basically just an empty slate, or just like empty space. And how are you supposed to connect with that? Now, good news is that after all this process is complete, you will naturally feel just like another human, like anybody else. And it is possible to connect with people like actually way deeper than before. You might actually have noticed this, that people who are very good in getting people to like them, charismatic, successful in dating, there are two ways, right? You either manipulate other egos all the time, and you kind of make them see themselves how they want to be seen, which to a certain extent everybody wants that. Everybody wants just to reinforce the image they have of themselves. But then there's also this ability to connect very intimately and kind of go past this like sense of just validation seeking, and sincerely look at the person for who they are, even including their flaws, even including the parts that they are hiding from themselves. And in doing that, what you're actually signaling to the other person is that you have dissolved your ego to such a large extent that you're not filtering everything through your own mind, but you're actually seeing the person. And when you're actually seeing the person, it is very connecting and very deep, because you're operating beyond what is so shallow, which is just very boring and superficial, and nobody likes that, which is the sense of authenticity, right? You are actually being with the person and not the fantasy projection of the person or what the person thinks it wants to hear. The deepest connections you will have, not just with other people in your life, but through your own life, is if you can completely let yourself be absorbed by the sense of being the ultimate witness. To maybe not identify in your head with the word "I'm the ultimate witness," because this can also create like a sort of grasping or clinging to this abstract concept, but to just acknowledge the fact that there's not a single microsecond in your life where you're not in some form witnessing. And when you think about like sleep or like dreamless sleep, you might say like, yeah, maybe there I'm kind of like not 100% witnessing anymore. Although I do think that there's still rather something than nothing, even when you're dreamless sleeping. But it's like, very dim form of consciousness, very like tiny. But it's still you. And you wake up the next day. And no matter what happened through your entire life trajectory, somehow the kid that was 5 years old and the person you are now are still the same. And you can kind of connect these dots. And it's just like, wait, there's something through all the witnessing, through all the flux and all the change that has remained the same. How is that possible? And in investigating that, you find some profound answers.